Hello and welcome to part 1 of Snapdragon Statistics. This video will go over an introduction to SPSS, including how to set up your first spreadsheet. We will also cover types of variables and measurements, information that will certainly help you get to know your dataset. To start with, this is the data view of the SPSS user interface. I want to mention in passing that this is SPSS version 24. If we look at the top bar, you have File, which is standard for any program. Here you can open and save your spreadsheets as well as your output window, and you can also import files from Excel. We also have the Edit and View drop-downs that will allow you to manipulate your spreadsheet and customize your ribbon as you see fit. Next is the Data drop-down. Here you can restructure your data, sort your data, and even split your data into subgroups. We will be using some of these options in future videos. Next is the Transform drop-down. Here, for instance, you can compute and transform your variables. You can also dummy code your variables, rank your cases, and create a time series. The Analyze drop-down is what you will be using the most of course. This drop-down is almost every statistical analysis at your fingertips. We will be covering each separately. Granted, SPSS cannot do everything, and anything that I cannot show in SPSS, I will show you in R. What is great about SPSS, though, is that it is very easy to run an analysis without having knowledge of how to write code. But if you do prefer code, you can run each analysis in the syntax prompt, which you can get to by going to File, New, and Syntax. The next important drop-down would be Graphs. SPSS can make some amazing graphs that are very clean and aesthetically pleasing. What's more is you can pull them into PowerPoint and have even greater access to editing. The Utilities and Extensions drop-down allows for even greater customization of your SPSS, but the odds of you using either are fairly small, so we won't be focusing on them. On the ribbon, of course, is everything you'll need in shorthand. Here's opening a file, saving a file, printing a file. You can also look at your recent history. You can undo and redo an action, and of course sort your spreadsheet, insert your variable, and of course delete variables, and basically editing your spreadsheet in a way that makes sense for you. So why don't we go ahead and make a spreadsheet. You'll notice on the bottom it says Data View and Variable View. Think of Variable View as creating the labels for each of your columns in the spreadsheet. Okay, so notice in Variable View that you have several columns. The ones that you'll be paying attention to the most will be the Name column, the Type column, the Width and Decimal columns, the Label and Values column, and then the Measure column. So let's start out with a type of column that's generally the beginning column in any spreadsheet, which would be Date. Note that in the Name column you cannot use spaces. That's what the Label column is for. So here we have Date. You can choose a type. You'll notice they have several types to choose from: numeric, comma, dot, scientific notation, date, dollar, custom currency, string, and then restricted numeric. So this is Date. So we can choose the date and the format. For date, we don't really have to worry about width and decimal. Label would be something like date of capture. We also don't have to worry about the values column. I'll show you when that's for use. And then we also don't really have to worry about the measurement column. Next would be something such as ID, because you want to classify your individuals. This would be numeric because you have numbered your individuals in a way that is meaningful to you. So we'll call this individual ID. It doesn't have to have decimals, it can be whole numbers. And because we're classifying, this would be something like nominal data. Now I work on frogs, and frogs have generally two types of mating behaviors. And so this is a really good point to start talking about types of variables that your data set can have. And so variables can be classified as either qualitative or quantitative. Something like behavior is going to be qualitative because it is a categorical variable. So frogs, for instance, can either call to attract mates or they cannot call to attract mates. And so if we start a column and call it behavior, here, if it's a categorical variable, you generally choose string as the type. We'll label it as mating behavior. And it's also going to be nominal because you are classifying the behavior as calling or not calling. Now we can also turn nominal variables into quantitative variables. So if we want to quantify it, and quantify it is just numerical data. Qualitative is categorical, but quantitative is numerical. And quantitative can also be subdivided into discrete, which would be a whole number, or continuous, which would be interval numbers such as height or body size. So we can actually dummy code our behavior variable into a numeric nominal measurement. So if we want to dummy code our behavior here, it'll then be numeric. We still don't really need any decimal places. We're going to dummy code it into binary for mating behavior. And what's really nice about SPSS is that it's really easy to dummy code your variables into binary, meaning we're going to code it into 0 and 1s. So because I said frogs can either call or not call to get mates, we're going to go ahead and dummy code calling as 0 and not calling as 1. If you're ever interested in how this works for frogs, feel free to contact me and I'll tell you everything about it. But we'll go ahead and dummy code our variables. Now we've created a numeric nominal measurement by dummy coding. Now, as regards to continuous quantitative data, body size would be a type of continuous quantitative data. In frogs, body size is generally measured as snout ischial length, or SIL. That's just basically measuring from the nose to the pelvis. This would be numeric, and it can have decimal points, but for the sake of this, we're going to not put any decimals. We'll label it by writing it out, snout ischial length. Because we don't need to code it, we won't be using values. Values is pretty much just for dummy coding your variables. But now we're measuring on a scale. So there are different types of measurements for variables. You have ordinal, which is ranking your values, which you can do qualitatively, such as when you're reading an evaluation and you see poor to excellent. But you can also quantify that using the dummy coding. So instead of poor to excellent, it'd be maybe 1 is poor and 5 is excellent. Nominal, once again, is just used for identifying and classifying, such as in gender, behavior, or species. And of course you can write that in as a dummy code as well. But then with scale, as in the case of body size, there's also the interval and ratio scale measurements. Intervals are measures that can be counted, they can be added, subtracted, and ranked. They're always quantitative. And one thing that you want to note is that the interval scale, under the scale, a 0 doesn't mean an absence of something. It's more arbitrary. So there's no absolute 0, such as in Celsius. But ratio scale, in this type of scale, multiplication and division, they become meaningful. It's always quantitative again, and this includes something like body size. And of course, you can have a true 0. So for this, the scale in SPSS includes either interval or ratio scale. You don't have to distinguish which one it is, but that's basically what that is referring to. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and we'll start making our spreadsheet. So this is now what it looks like. We have our labels up top, and you can of course adjust the width of the columns. So let's go ahead and just make up a date. We'll say 12/21/2017, and we will give this to 10 individuals. We can then assign individual IDs, and we can also assign behavior. So I'm going to go ahead and put C for calling and NC for not calling. So let's just say these guys all called. Here we have a non-caller. Maybe a caller again. And now here's how the dummy coding works. So if you remember in the variable view, I dummy coded 0 for calling and 1 for not calling. And so now all we do is we turn it into a numeric binary code. So 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, and 0. And now for size, right now we're on a scaled measurement. So this is something akin to using a ruler, right? And so the frog species I work with is they're generally pretty small. So we'll go ahead and we'll put it in millimeters. So let's say that this one here, actually if we're going by sort of reality, the non-collars are typically smaller. So let's go with some reality. And so this is basically just an introduction on how to use the spreadsheet. You can do all sorts of things with your data in order to make the spreadsheet more meaningful and easier to work with. I will show you in future episodes how to really work with the data set, really large data sets included. But I hope this sort of provided you with a good introductory into SPSS and the types of measurements and variables that you will encounter in your science career. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below and I will be happy to help you.